In September this year, legislation was passed to make amendments to the Corporations Act. What this means is that many financial institutions and large businesses will have to report on their greenhouse gas emissions and their climate risks starting from January next year. There's a number of criteria that determine whether or not a business will actually be subject to this legislation, and that includes things such as revenue, gross assets, and number of employees. So while most Australian farming businesses won't be directly impacted by this legislation, they will be indirectly impacted, because those entities that do have to start mandatory reporting not only have to report on their Scope 1 and 2 emissions, that is, those emissions arising from the day-to-day operations of their business, but they'll also have to start reporting on their Scope 3 emissions. That involves emissions that occur up and down their supply chain. When you think about a lot of these big businesses, banks, insurance groups, retailers and processors, who forms their Scope 3 emissions? Their supply chain emissions, it's farmers. This means that in order to satisfy that compliance and those reporting, is that those supply chain entities will request from farming businesses data and information required to calculate those emissions. So the sooner that farming businesses can start setting up the systems to collect the required data, to understand that data, the better place they'll be when compliance comes knocking.